I knew it was but a matter of time.
I know that mobile games have something of a negative reputation amongst the gaming community. A lot of it is no doubt due to the sheer avarice of a lot of these games, with you barely able to clear one stage or even pause before they throw another ad at you or just beg you for money. It's frankly disgusting how much these games try to shake down their players, and it's why I tend to avoid them, so much so that I barely even have any B-roll of these games for this bit here, and that's why you're mostly seeing Elden Ring, but I'll spice it up with that one clip of Plants vs Zombies I have to work with. I think my least favourite thing about a lot of these mobile titles is that there's practically nothing to them. That the best a lot of them could offer is nice wallpaper over an experience so shallow that even a tick could stand in a puddle of it and not get its feet wet. I have nothing against free-to-play games as a rule, nor against them making use of microtransactions or other paid elements because we already got in for free, and in essence you pay by needing to endure the game shaking its noisy little cup at you. Honestly though, there is a limit. If a game just can't help itself and bombards you non-stop with ads and packs and other ways for you to spend money on it, then it just gets tiring to deal with. Today's topic is 100% that sort of game. I tried Raid Shadow Legends because a lot of YouTubers did paid plugs for it, and whilst they always sound phony as all fuck and are very clearly taken only for the payday they offer, I wondered if at the core was there something really worth playing. Was Raid Shadow Legends actually a gem of a game whose marketing team and the YouTubers of the world were only doing a disservice to by ramming it down our throats? Were the cringy, terrible ads and irritating sponsorships overshadowing something that was actually alright? After all, not every free mobile game is a massive piece of shit that only wants to drain the players' wallets as it preys upon people who have problems with gambling and overspending. I've even played a couple of free-to-play games that didn't just try to drain your wallet. I mean, they had paid content, but it was easily ignorable. Maybe Raid would be like that, right? Right? It's not going to be a piece of shit after all of this, is it? Is it?
Fool! You fell for my trap, little human. Welcome to this layer of digital hell.
Not exactly subtle in these parts, I see.
Not even a little. Now that you're here, you won't need those pesky English pounds that seem to weigh down your wallet.
Yeah, you should just let me have them. I'll give you a bunch of colourful items, the majority of which don't seem to do anything, but look at the colours.
Jesus, wheelbarrowing Christ, this is gonna be a bitch. Anyway, Raid Shadow Legends is... what the fuck are you, Raid? Your store page has you listed as a dark fantasy RPG, and honestly I think it's hilarious because that couldn't feel less representative of what this product is. It's more of a strategy game really, with some RPG elements, which isn't bad in and of itself, but it's about as much of an RPG as the original Bioshock was. The gameplay itself is simple enough. You summon random champions, then head into battle, either completing campaign missions, clearing elemental themed dungeons, or by fighting in the arena against other players, either in live PvP or just by picking on their champions who stand guard. The battles are dirt simple. Most champions have between 1 and 4 abilities, and an affinity that artificially makes them weaker or stronger versus certain enemies, which amounts to little more than a game of rock, paper, scissors. Force types are strong against magic types types are strong against spirit types, and spirit types are strong against force types. It's not rocket science. A 4-year-old could work this out, but this game is hardly appropriate for children, so it's odd that a core part of its combat system is basically ripped from Pokemon. You play the battles by selecting a champion with a skill when it's their turn, and then tapping on the person you want them to use that skill against. Or of course you can press the auto button, let the game play itself, and then go and do something that will actually engage you and let your champions do all the work. This feature exists for one reason, and you won't convince me otherwise. It's here because the game is riddled with grind, and playing the same battle over and over again just for a chance to get an item you need that doesn't even drop half the fucking time is really fucking boring. You see, the game's campaign mode steadily raises in difficulty as you progress through it, as you could expect. And if you want to keep going, you'll need your champions to be the strongest they can be, and whilst they do level up as you fight with them, that's not going to be enough. You'll need to ascend them using items found in dungeons, and you better believe it's a pain in the ass, because you need multiple specific potions for each ascension, but most of the time the dungeon boss will only drop one of the potions you need, so you need to clear and re-clear them over and over again. Otherwise your team will get wiped out in campaign stages, and I can only imagine how screwed you'll be if you played the PvP. Sadly, you need to be level 50 before you can do the live PvP, and given the fact that I'm only level 18 after a week of play, you can probably imagine how much of a fuck I don't give. This game is really boring if I'm honest here. See, the first time you come before a big dungeon boss, it's kind of neat because to the game's absolute credit, some of its monster designs are actually quite good and very detailed, and in general the game knocks it out of the park for graphics for a mobile title. However, when you've come up against them and wiped the floor with them for the 30th time because they stubbornly refuse to drop the one item you need, and all that goodwill the game earned for its presentation is sucked away. The sound design is significantly less impressive, all of its background tracks are generic as all hell and are pretty much the exact opposite of an earworm for how forgettable they all are. I really tried to have fun with the game because no one wants to sit around being bored for hours, and I still held out some hope that there was something worth playing here, but honestly I had more fun that time I fell down the stairs at my mum's house. The game never really clicked for me for a bunch of reasons, but mostly because the battles themselves, which provide the core gameplay loop, are really fucking dull. 9 times out of 10 I steamrolled the enemy team, with most of my champions being left with significantly more than half their health when the fight was done. If this doesn't happen, then either the fight is long and tedious, usually because some enemies have some irritating abilities that make them impervious to death for several turns, which just leads to me throwing out basic attacks until the bastards finally get the message and drop, or you'll be steamrolled yourself. The battles are never truly engaging, and you still get currency and XP from losing a battle, so in reality the only real result from a loss is your time was slightly more wasted on that whole encounter. The Spirit Dungeon boss was especially annoying for this because it recovers large chunks of HP every turn, and if you're slightly too low a level then you can't do enough damage to actually kill it, and all you're really doing in that fight is drawing out your own defeat. At least you can increase the speed of battles by pressing that little number button next to the auto command, but neither feature being present can be seen as a point in the game's favour. Good rule of thumb, if a game offers to play itself for you, then the game was never interested in entertaining you and should be jettisoned from your device as swiftly as possible so it doesn't waste your space. The battles in the campaign mode and the dungeons all have 3 rounds apiece, with the latter battles always ending in a boss fight. The annoying thing about the dungeons, or rather one of the annoying things about them, is that they're set to only open on certain days of the week. So if you want to get some of those red potions for your favourite force-based hero, then you better be sure to log in early on the correct day and leave the dungeon battles on auto so you can have the game gather the bits for you whilst you do literally anything else. Personally, I ate large quantities of ice cream and played Dawn of War Dark Crusade. And I'm sorry, but if your game is perfectly playable without needing a player, then your game isn't worth shit.
Oh, come on, I'm not really that bad. Oh, before I finish that sentence, how'd you like to buy the Silver Sentence pack for $9.99?
Jesus, you can't even defend yourself without being an avaricious prick about it.
Now, my dear, the game was free to download and play. So what's an occasional ad?
You say occasional, but one loading up every time I return to the base screen and a bunch popping up every time I start the game, even if I've already played a session earlier today and dismissed them all, is taking a few litres of piss. I accept that free-to-play games have monetization elements within them, but a good free-to-play game at least has something engaging at its core so that I actually want to give it some money. Most of the packs serve to give you a bunch of the Ascension items or a few new shards that you can use to summon random champions, and this right here is why I consider this game inappropriate for minors, because that's basically gambling. Sure, one of the green shards might give you a decent 3-star champion who's worth investing in, but it's far more likely to give you one of the several archers or knights that each of the game's factions have for no other reason than to pad out a summon pool and make you less likely to get anything worth a shit. I hate the randomness of summons in games like this. All it really does is serve to ensnare people with spending problems because you better believe you can buy these shards with real money, which again is just gambling when you get right down to it, if not legally then it is in spirit. These are worse than loot boxes because at least with loot boxes you had more than one thing coming out of them, and that's hardly a defense of loot boxes, which are a bullshit mechanic developed to artificially prevent players from just buying the shit that they want. That's the main issue I take with Raid, because really the only reason it exists is to vacuum up money, and honestly it's not even an original game. There are so many like this, but the one that I was reminded of was Summoner's War, which was at least kind of cute, but everything Raid does was done years before by Summoner's War. You can level up characters by sacrificing other characters, you can apply runes or gear in Raid's case to form sets that provide a champion with bonuses. Each champion has an affinity that artificially restricts their effectiveness. Both games use randomized summons as the primary method of building a player's fighting force and have time-based elemental dungeons. Shit, Raid, what do you really have when we get right down to it?
Hey, there's a lot of worthwhile content you haven't mentioned. Just play a little longer and reach a much higher level, then you'll be able to experience much more. Oh look, I have a brand new pack that gives my sprite hero a mustache for only $2.99.
You can bite me. I have this rule when playing games. It's that the "it gets better later" argument is never a point in a game's favour and only serves to justify me putting the game down and doing something else. If I'm bored now, I'm not going to sit around for 20 more hours in the hope that the future content isn't as boring as this, when I could just play Very Little Nightmares or hell, even A Girl Adrift, which is basically just tapping the screen to catch fish, but is a hell of a lot more engaging than anything Raid does. Seriously, fuck anyone who tries to use that as a defense. It gets better later is how people have tried to defend all sorts of things to me before, and honestly, I don't give a fuck what the game will will be, I care what it is while I'm playing, and Raid's gameplay is so boring that the self-playing element almost seems like a merciful inclusion. Until you realise, of course, that the game was made this way on purpose, and when everything is brought together, what we've got is a game that runs out of shit to offer about 10 minutes after you boot it up. It almost feels like an unholy evolution of those old Farmville games where you had to log in daily to tend to your crops, although in Raid you have to log in daily to get the reward for logging in daily, and then maybe I play a battle or two before desperately needing a shot of fun and signing out. You want to know something really sad though? A lot of effort was put into this game, just not anywhere that matters. Raid does try to tell the story of a party of adventurers travelling the land. The only issue is that there are no real characters on the player's end because your party is essentially made up of whatever random fuck you summoned and is subject to change repeatedly. We fight the corrupt king of a castle under siege, then a bat monster deep within the sewers, and later a very hungry dragon that devours the travellers that come its way, and there is a glimpse of potential here, but really it's just a framing device. It exists to give context to the battles that we fight, which on its own isn't bad. After all, the story just existing so that we have a reason to engage with the gameplay is a tried and tested method for when your video game is something that people are going to play for the gameplay. Sadly, Raid isn't that kind of game.
It's barely a fucking game.
The story could have been the thing that engaged me, but if I'm honest, I was zoning out by the third campaign stage, and even now I can't remember a word of what the admittedly decent narrator said.
After dispatching the lizard men tainted by the shadow, the company waylaid a messenger bearing a missive from the king.
It really sounded like someone tried to tell the story of an epic quest. Sadly, they just didn't have an epic quest to talk about. What's even weirder is that each champion has an extensive lore entry, and the various factions all have some decent backstory to them, but this is the sort of thing that feels like it would have made a really good game great. Instead, it feels like the story team and the gameplay team were kept in different rooms with an armed guard stationed at the door to prevent them from interacting, so whilst the story people were doing their best to write a fantasy adventure, the gameplay team just sat with their hands up their rectums whilst drooling on their keyboards. The story of Raid takes place in the dark fantasy realm of Plarium, which is currently facing subjugation by someone called Siroth, who's apparently some ancient dark lord of sorts, and the main plot revolves around the resurrection of a Terrarian warrior who will defeat him and make everything all nice again. That's pretty much what the synopsis on Google says, and whilst I do respect the game for beginning and ending each of the campaign chapters with narration of the story, I can't for the life of me remember a single word spoken because it ultimately didn't matter. None of this matters, not really. I'd love to engage with the story, but why would I? The characters are non-existent, and whilst work has gone into giving each champion a decent amount of lore and backstory, it never really comes together in any significant way. Actually, there are faction wars which were only added this year, so maybe I'll quickly go back and see what those are. Oh, I can't do either of the open ones, apparently, because I've got the wrong heroes or something. And you can bet your ass that I'm not interested enough to come back later and find out. Sorry, but I'm not working to the schedule of a fucking video game. Given the fact that they just look like reskins in the dungeons, though, I doubt I'm missing anything. Sorry, this bit was meant to be dedicated to the story, wasn't it? But there was so little to really say at the moment, but more importantly, there just isn't really anything about it that matters. This game's only goal is money. It's free to play so it can draw as many people in as possible, and it hopes to use casino tactics of bright colours and upbeat sounds to entice the user to spend. As a result, Raid Shadow Legends is an utter waste of time and space, and it doesn't do much to help the image of mobile gaming. If you thought the medium was just undisguised greed with pretty pictures, then I wouldn't show you Raid and hope to convince you otherwise. The game is just boring. Its primary gameplay loop is so minimal that you don't even need to play it, and sure, there are a lot of champions and each have unique skills, but do you know how much of that really matters in the grand scheme of things? Not a lot, it turns out, as half the roster is useless after the first few levels and really only exists to serve as sacrifices to power up better characters. I even tried one of the game's super raids when I went to the toilet that one time, and you know what it was? A battle against an army of spiders with the boss spider that constantly heals and spawns more spiders, and the whole thing is just a drag. You can bet I noped out of there pretty fast. The thing is though, this tedium is all by design. The game needs to be just barely engaging enough to incentivize spending.
Hey, come on. If you just bought one little pack, then who knows? Something interesting might happen if you just buy one little microtransaction.
Fuck off, I already have buyer's remorse and I got in for free.
We will get to you eventually. You cannot resist the urge to spend.
You know you want one. Just one. Just one little pack.
One little pack is all it takes. You can't resist us forever.
Yeah, I know that, arswipe. I'm one of the people susceptible to this kind of game, and I know that because I spent way too much money on Summoners War a decade ago. Entire paychecks spent on this game's packs, and for what? A chance to get a decent monster or an alternate skin? No. I say no. I say get the fuck out of here, you predatory piece of shit. Things like this are why the mobile market and free-to-play games have such a terrible reputation. Games like Raid seek to make money by hooking people who have legitimate spending troubles and gambling problems, people who could have their entire lives ruined by a video game that drains their wallets because all of those little packs here and there, they all add up. Games like this can't afford to have engaging gameplay because the candle that burns brighter will dim faster. Instead, they need the bare minimum of interactivity so that anything that breaks the monotony, like a colourful little pack or the animation that plays when a champion levels up, seems so much more impressive because you've just spent hours bored out of your skull. It's frankly despicable, and it shouldn't surprise anyone that the company behind this game is listed as a gambling company, and with that fact out there, I have no qualms about calling this game out for what it is. In my humblest of opinions, Raid Shadow Legends is fucking evil, as is any game that exists for no other reason than to serve as a disguised casino that can prey upon the vulnerable. It's listed as PEGI 12 on the Play Store, and I personally say that no game with gambling mechanics should be listed as such. I know many people are quick to blame the victims here, either out of a pathetic sense of brand loyalty or because they don't understand that people who have legitimate problems when it comes to overspending and gambling can't fucking help it. Many turn to video games to escape their troubles, to get out of life for a little while, and if they come across a free-to-play game like Raid, they'll be taken in and easily preyed upon by the very entertainment that was supposed to provide them that release, that escape. It's just another level of the inferno for them. Not to mention the tweens and teens who really don't have a good grasp of money yet who risk falling for this shit. Of course, they are probably the people it wants most because it looks like a video game on the surface and it hopes to lure people in with that, but in truth, it could care less if you had fun playing it. As long as it gets you in so it can dangle those micropayments, or major payments in some cases, I mean Jesus fucking Christ, that's all they want. Raid Shadow Legends, you're a piece of shit. Both in terms of the quality of the product before me and your practices, which are morally indefensible. I'm sure there are some people who genuinely enjoy the gameplay loop, and if that's you, then understand I don't begrudge you for liking the video game part of this mess. That's fine, we like the games we like and I won't judge you for it. If those microtransactions and gambling mechanics don't concern you and you can play the game and have fun without them being a bother, then good, but to be fair, if that's the case, you are not the victim this game was hunting for. It could give less of a shit whether you live or die. I still personally believe that Raid is a bad video game and deeply immoral, and I question the values of anyone who tries to push it on others. Don't play Raid, it's not worth the time you'll spend or the space it will take up on your phone. I'm done with this shallow piece of shit. I'm done. I am done. I'm gonna go play some more Very Little Nightmares. And then maybe some Bolt Gun as well, because after a few days with Raid, I need to remember what fun is.
You haven't seen the last of me. Oh, they delayed me. Crap. Well, who's to say this is my final form? Maybe one day I'll be free from this mobile prison and onto more mainstream devices. Wait, what? Ew, no, get away from me. I don't even want you. Weak.